remind people that this government have left us, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have left us with an absolutely disastrous housing and homelessness crisis and a cost of living crisis for huge numbers of working people. And while the government may be feeling a bit confident and triumphalist at the moment, we think once the starting gun goes for this election, people are going to refocus on the manner in which this government has spectacularly failed to address the housing and homelessness crisis, the cost of living that is crushing huge numbers of people, and their failure to resolve the endemic crisis in our health service and many other public services. In particular, we want to highlight really the utterly cynical announcement yesterday about the new housing target figures by the government. This is just typical of the way in which Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael try and cynically mask and obscure their utter failure to address housing and homelessness in this country. For more than 6 months, every week, we have been asking in the Dáil and the Business Committee for the government to discuss the Housing Commission figures, which showed that we needed double the amount of housing and double the amount of social and affordable housing that the government had planned or proposed under Housing for All. They refused. They said week in, week out, oh, we have no problem debating these figures, we have no problem with an open discussion about what we need to do to address the housing crisis. They never allowed for a discussion, and they're not allowing for a discussion this week. So this is a cynical pretense that they are actually serious about addressing a crisis that they didn't even want to discuss, never mind resolve. And we will be particularly highlighting the fact, given that they have now admitted that Housing for All targets were totally inadequate and they have failed to address the housing crisis, that even as they now announce these targets, they have no capacity to actually deliver the affordable housing and the social housing that would be necessary to meet those targets and address the housing crisis. I just want to draw people's attention, if people haven't already seen it, to this document that was produced in September, which I think was produced by somebody in the Housing Agency for the government. But it's really stark, because what it's saying is that the private sector on which the government have completely depended to try and address the housing crisis cannot deliver houses for less than €450,000, apartments for less than €550,000, and suburban apartments in places like Dublin and the big epicentres of the housing crisis for less than €590,000. Utterly unaffordable. So even as they do increase to some degree housing construction, they have no plan to make it affordable. And it's why we believe the only way we even have the slightest chance of resolving the housing crisis, getting housing supply, and particularly social and affordable housing supply, up to the necessary levels, is if we have a state construction company that strips out the profiteering, the finance costs, the costs of land speculation, all of which are built in to these completely unaffordable house prices and indeed unaffordable rents that are being charged with the new housing that has been built. Only if the state strips out the profiteering, develops its own construction capacity, and takes hold of the zoned residential land bank to build houses at an affordable level, can we have any hope to solve the housing crisis. And we have been fairly unique in arguing for a long time we need that state construction company in order to have even a chance of resolving the housing crisis. The other thing, just to mention briefly, is we will have an amendment into the Finance Bill. We have a few amendments into the Finance Bill, but one of them is about the USC, and we will be reminding people that that was supposed to be a temporary emergency austerity tax, which is still crushing hundreds of thousands of workers, have reneged on their promise to get rid of, and we will be making a last-ditch effort to urge the government to get rid of the USC for ordinary workers and replace it with a wealth tax on the very, very wealthy in our society. Last point I just want to make is about Palestine and the Occupied Territories Bill and so on. We will be raising again today the manner in which this government have, in the most cynical fashion, spoken out of both sides of their mouths on the issue of Palestine, while mouthing words of sympathy and criticism of Israel's atrocities and crimes and its genocidal massacre in Gaza. They have done everything in their power to block any meaningful sanctions against Israel for the crimes that it's committing against the Palestinians and now the people of Lebanon. So it is, again, cynicism of the most extreme kind for the Micheál Martin to talk about now. We're going to finally look at the Occupied Territories Bill, when it was this government that put the money message cynically into play in order to block, since 2018, the passage of the Occupied Territories Bill. Tomorrow we will be highlighting at the Central Bank the fact that Ireland is one of only 3 countries in Europe that is facilitating the sale of Israeli war bonds, bonds that are being explicitly marketed by Israel to finance their massacre of the people in Gaza and the atrocities they are committing in the West Bank and Lebanon, and the government have also failed to do anything about that. There will also be a major national protest, which I think will make clear what people, the public, think about the government's failure to sanction Israel this Saturday, where we would expect tens of thousands of people on the streets, starting at 1 o'clock in the city centre and marching to the Dáil on a national demonstration demanding sanctions against Israel for its genocide and its war crimes against the Palestinian people. So we will be urging people to get out on the streets and join that demonstration, and we've no doubt many, many thousands. There will also be a protest outside the Guinness Storehouse this evening, where really inappropriately the US ambassador is hosting a party in relation to the US elections, which, given the fact that both of the candidates running in the US elections are fully intend to continue with the arming of Israel, have given it impunity, have no intention of taking any action against Israel for its crimes against the Palestinians. There will be a protest outside the Guinness Storehouse, where that party, being hosted by the US ambassador, is taking place this evening. So we'll be highlighting that as well.
Just a couple of points. First thing to say is that there is an attempt to create a narrative to say that effectively the main outcome of the election is already decided. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are going to be re-elected, and it is simply a question of whether they're going to have a majority between them or whether they'll be dependent on some parties or independents to prop them up. And then you have the unseemly scramble of the Labour Party and the Greens already offering themselves up as potential coalition partners, something that would represent no real change at all. As part of that is the attempt of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to differentiate themselves, to pretend that Tweedledum and Tweedledee are not identical, a manufactured row about whether Micheál Martin is tetchy or is not tetchy. We absolutely reject the idea that this coming election debate should be about whether Micheál Martin is tetchy or not. We reject the idea that there is no real change on offer in this election, and we think that when people focus their minds on the fact that an election is coming, it obviously can determine the government for the coming 5 years, the prospect of a real alternative will emerge. There are lots of people out there who will look at the prospect of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael being re-elected and know exactly what it means. It means increased numbers of people in homelessness, it means rents continuing to soar, it means house prices and apartment prices continuing to soar, it means hospital waiting lists continuing to worsen, it means worsening waiting lists for children with additional needs. And people in their large numbers will reject that. And that, for us, is what this election is going to be about, to say that this is time to end the 100-year rule of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, not to continue it, that an alternative Ireland is possible. And the best way for people who want to see that, who want to see a government without Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael to vote, is definitely to vote for the candidates of People Before Profit and Solidarity. We are literally the only party to guarantee people that in no circumstances will we be propping up a government involving Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, because that offers no choice at all. So we want to see a left government, and we encourage people to vote number 1 for our candidates and to transfer left. I would point out that this coming election is going to see the biggest socialist electoral challenge in Ireland in the history of this state. We are standing at the moment in every constituency but 2. The but 2 may come down in the coming days. So literally almost everybody across the country will have a chance to vote for People Before Profit Solidarity, to vote for parties that are not going to prop up Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, to vote for the possibility of a left government. The other issue I just want to raise briefly is I attended the launch last night of this excellent report, Falling Through the Cracks, by the Child Law Project. I recommend everyone at least having a brief read of it, or if it's possible to listen to the speeches last night. This is another kind of documentary evidence of the way that the state is failing children in this state. I think that has been a real feature of the past 5 years, from children with scoliosis, children with additional needs, but also children in the care system being systematically failed by the state. And what the report outlines is that over the past 3 years the situation has deteriorated. The cohort of children who have been left without a suitable placement or therapeutic service to meet the child's needs has grown. For the first time ever, we've seen cases of young children for whom no foster care is available, very young children as young as 4 years being placed in residential care, and a waiting list for admission to special care. These are retrograde steps that have undermined progress made over the past 20 years. That's incredible at a time when the state has a record budget surplus, more money than ever, that we're actually going backwards in terms of child protection. It also should be noted that the Child Law Project, which is effectively made up of lawyers who go in to watch in-camera court cases and then report on those, obviously while keeping the identification of the people involved anonymised, that project has not been able to report on any cases since the end of June because of an absence of funding. So this has been a running project where the tender has been put out. Child Law Project has won for a number of years in a row. I think over 12 years you've had the Child Law Project. But then this year the funding stopped in June. I raised it with Minister O'Gorman in an oral parliamentary question on the Thursday before the bank holiday, and then on Friday finally a tender went out for these services to begin from next January. That's welcome that there will be reporting taking place from next January, but again it should be pointed out that the funding being provided is the same amount of funding that was provided for the last 3 years, when we've seen inflation of 20% in that time. So in effect, the state is saying we'll have 20% less reporting of what is happening. These are vital reports because they enable us to see what is actually happening to the most vulnerable children in our society. We have to be able to have reports on it in order then to be able to act. So I would call on Minister O'Gorman to ensure that the funding is at least increased in line with inflation.
Any questions?